And welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, End-to-End Visibility in Manufacturing and the Future of MES, sponsored by GrayMatter. My name is Dennis Semeka, Technology Editor of Industry Week. Before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If at any time you are having audio difficulties or slides are not advancing, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. If you are running pop-up blocking software, you will need to disable it to view the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please use the question mark button in the upper right-hand corner to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology allows you to resize the presentation by clicking the maximize icon in the upper right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your participation during today's event. To submit your questions, simply type into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. We'll be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. Please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue. A quick note, this presentation is available as a PDF download. Check the Download Presentation tab on your console for access. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Industry Week website within the next day for you to review. You'll be notified via email when the archive is available. When the webinar ends, please take a moment to complete the feedback form that will appear on your screen. I would now like to welcome today's speaker. Todd Virden, Manufacturing Solutions Architect at GrayMatter, spent more than 13 years with General Electric's lighting, healthcare, and transportation business units in a variety of automation and integration roles. Now, as the Manufacturing Solution Architect at GrayMatter, he helps clients connect the dots and facilitate true digital transformation. Joining Todd for a discussion following the presentation will be Jeremy Boren, Brand Manager at GrayMatter. With that, Todd, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be listening from today. As Dennis said, my name is Todd Virden. I'm a Manufacturing Solution Architect with GrayMatter. Prior to joining GrayMatter, as Dennis said, I spent about 13 years with GE Lighting, Healthcare, and Transportation in a variety of advanced manufacturing roles. So when I started my career in the lighting business unit, worked on things like robots, vision systems, PLCs, HMIs, SCADA systems for scrap tracking or automation purposes, and started dabbling in MES. Spent 2 years working for GE Healthcare, where I worked on new product introduction and product management, implementing new manufacturing equipment and working on the validation side of things. And lastly, with GE Transportation, about 7.5 years in a variety of different roles. Started out as a manufacturing engineer to build a new factory. That transformed into a few different roles out of sheer necessity, like production supervisor, facilities manager, but ultimately got to know GrayMatter when I was in a machine connectivity role, where we were connecting manufacturing assets in about 13 sites around the US and Brazil and Mexico. So we were successful in connecting over 400 assets over about a 4.5-year period to solve a myriad of different problems. And my last 2 years with GE Transportation was in additive manufacturing. So got to see a different side of things, got to see how products are taken from design phase through manufacturing, through quality validation, that sort of thing. Now, with GrayMatter, I take my experience in manufacturing and apply it to our end customers to say, how can we help them solve problems and really embark on a digital transformation journey? So we're going to kick things off today with a quick survey just to understand where the audience is in your digital transformation. So go ahead and send this survey out. We'll just give it a few seconds here to see where you are in your journey. So the results should be coming in here in just a few seconds. And once they're starting to be available, I will send them out to everybody so you can see where your peers that are listening today happen to fall. All right, we've got some coming in so far. It looks like 4 or 5 respondents. All right, we've got a good mix of people that haven't started yet. They're in some sort of proof of concept or proof of value, or people that have been doing this for years. Just give it a few more seconds here. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in the survey. I think it's good just to help level set all of us on who all is listening and kind of tailor the event to the audience a bit. Give it just 5 or 10 more seconds here. All right, so we'll go ahead and send this out, but it looks like about 40% of you haven't started any kind of digital transformation yet. About 31 and a half, 33, sorry, the results are coming in live and changing as I'm reading, are in some sort of proof of concept. And about 28% have been doing this for a long time. So you should be seeing the results on your end now momentarily. And next, we're going to talk a little bit about who GrayMatter is. For those of you who are not familiar, we were founded in 1991 just north of Pittsburgh, a little town called Swickley. And back then, our founders, who are both still involved today, saw this thing as called the PC, as being able to change the way manufacturing works. Ever since that time, we've always been on the forefront of operational technologies and trying to find the new latest and greatest technologies to help manufacturers. So the way we think about ourselves today really is a three-legged stool, if you will. Upfront consultants like myself that help customers understand where they're at in their journey and connect the dots on how to get to where they're going. A group of implementation engineers. We're about 160 people total today. Large quantity of that is our engineering team. And then lastly, technology curation. So as I mentioned, always trying to be out on the forefront, looking for the new game-changing technologies that can help our customers. From a services standpoint, we really do run the gamut of everything from panel design and build, PLC programming, SCADA design, architecture or graphics, performance management, where I spend the majority of my time talking about MES or dashboarding and reporting to get the most out of your data, and even tools like advanced analytics and machine learning. And all of this is underpinned by industrial cybersecurity. So we've got a belief here at GrayMatter that we shouldn't be doing automation projects if we're not at least talking about cybersecurity and how to use it as an enabling technology to help you on your journey. Because what we don't want to have happen is we do some really cool automation project and then you become the target of a ransomware or cyber attack of some sort. So what industries or verticals do we serve? Really, again, kind of run the gamut: food and bev, consumer packaged goods, lots of diversified industrials. Really, you name it. Could be fabrication, could be machining, could be assembly, could be some sort of manufacturing process. And then lots of process customers, liquids and chemical sorts of groups. And then I'd say maybe a third of our team focuses heavily on the water wastewater industry. So moving water around the US to clean it up and get it back into use in homes. So we're gonna jump into some of the things that we're seeing from our customer base, from technology or talent challenges to operational performance improvements, how companies are starting to use analytics to drive their digitization, how COVID has affected everybody, including myself, and we're now talking about remote first. And then lastly, and this won't be the key topic of today, but cybersecurity. So right now, I'd say everybody I talk to is having the same problem in regards to talent. It is hard to attract. It is even harder to retain the folks that you've got. So we're constantly looking for new ways to take the technology capabilities that we've got and deploy them to help people. So could be more automation, could be more MES, could be just AI and ML. So using the AI and machine learning technologies that exist to capture information from your more seasoned employees so that the younger employees don't have to make decisions as much. It's really pervasive, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, we're seeing it everywhere. Next, in the operational performance side of things, lots of folks that we're talking to lately are looking to unlock information from existing data sources. So they've got a historian or they've got some sort of SQL database with lots of data in it, but they're not really sure how to use it to drive change within their environments. And another good example, I'll kind of combine bullets 2 and 3 here, is getting the most out of their assets to avoid unnecessary CapEx. Had a story recently of a customer who had they bought some new equipment, and then somebody came and said, I think we need more. I don't think we have enough equipment to meet our capacity needs. After just slicing and dicing the data for just maybe 20 minutes, the answer was pretty clear. There was not an equipment problem, there was a personnel problem. And it was that the machines weren't being run when people were there to run them. So the company was able to avoid a pretty significant CapEx spend just by taking a quick look at their data and understanding how to use it to improve performance. And lastly here, and I'd say this is a really big one right now, is understanding the effects of continuous improvement. So Lean is a fantastic set of tools to drive performance improvements within your factory, but you need the digital tools to understand, am I making the changes that I think I am? When I was at GE Transportation, we had the mantra of lean first, then digital, because we wanted to lean out the process as much as possible and then digitize it so we weren't reworking everything. But it really does become a double-edged sword to be able to understand, are the changes you're making having the right effect on your process? Already mentioned it a couple times this morning, but analytics driving digitization. So what we are seeing more and more is that people that have been on a journey for a long time, they've got a lot of data in their systems, in their historians, in their SCADAs, or what have you, and being able to unlock that and turn it into actionable insights through AI and machine learning is starting to move the needle in ways that people didn't think of in the past. So things like predictive downtime or predictive quality, being able to identify what key performance indicators suggest that you're going to have a quality excursion, and then understanding what X's drive that Y so that you can make a change preemptively, avoid making bad product, avoid having a recall, but really getting out in front of it. Remote first. So this has been a huge one. My 14 years with GE was always in a factory somewhere. With GrayMatter, first year was here in the office, and now we're almost all at-home workers. And that's been a big shift that we see across the board. A lot of the folks that are in the factories working, they never went home, but a lot of the factory support teams had to. So being able to have technologies that allow them to remote in, make tweaks to the system, and monitor the systems is really becoming the new normal. And we've got to do that in a safe and secure way. Couple that with a lot of, I'll say, consumer expectations. So tools like Amazon or Uber Eats, right? We expect data to be at our fingertips 24/7. And really, we want to be able to provide tools that give that same kind of look and feel, but based on manufacturing data. And lastly, the cybersecurity effect. So this is huge, and the news is highlighting all too regularly, unfortunately, all of the bad actors that are attacking us. So our goal at GrayMatter is to help you protect using defense in depth strategies so that you can really protect your assets and you don't become the next target. The events like the Colonial Pipeline, people 5-10 years ago didn't even think about those, but now they're really, unfortunately, becoming commonplace. So with that, we're going to jump into another quick survey. This one is about defining your top challenges, and I'm going to send this out to the audience now. And like the last one, we'll give it just a few seconds for results to start coming in. And then once we've got a quorum, we'll share those and we'll move on with the rest of the presentation. Thank you. I'm seeing a couple coming in. Yeah, my personal favorite one here is the last part of question 3, getting people to use the cool stuff I gave them. We debated on using that language. I'm like, no, that's, as technologists, I think a lot of us believe that the stuff we give our teams is pretty awesome, and we just look to say, how do we get them to use it? That's where I say we've really got to be thinking about change management and the people side of things from the very beginning. It cannot be technology for technology's sake. It's got to be technology to solve some sort of a problem. I'll give it just 10 more seconds. We've got, looks like about 50-ish results in so far. All right, awesome. We'll send these out to everybody so you can see where others are at. And I'd say it's not exactly surprising that deriving value is the biggest one here, and that really comes down to what did you expect coming out of your journey, right? What were you trying to achieve, and did you lay good ground rules before you got started? So that leads us right into how do we drive value? Some of the best practices that we see and we work with our customers to implement. We'll go through each one of these individually, but I'd say the first one is what I refer to as operator health checks. And that's really kind of the beginning of the journey and making sure you're getting good data. Optimizing KPIs is exactly that. Are you understanding the data that you've got, and are you optimizing for the KPIs that matter? Do you have visibility into all of your information so you can make well-grounded decisions on how to change? And then lastly, we'll spend some time talking about templates for deployment and making sure that you're deploying in a way that makes sense. So system and people health check. So it doesn't matter really where you're at on the journey, whether you're just getting started or you've been doing this for years. I would say everything really needs to start with the plant level operators. They are the people that are making your products day in and day out. They're the ones that are closest to the quality problems, the scrap problems, the downtime problems, and the ones that are doing all the data collection for you now, whether it's on paper or digital or some other system. So again, if you're just getting started, maybe it's less of a check-in and more of a use that team to help design the solution. So think about them as you're designing it. How many clicks do they have to go through? What kind of information are you making them enter? That sort of thing. And if you've been doing it for years, then it's really about getting their feedback to say what's working and what isn't working, what is really hard to do and what's really easy to do, that sort of thing. Once you've got their feedback, their input, the next step is to talk to people that use the data. So often there's a divide between people that are generating information and people that are using it to solve some sort of a problem. And for removing obstacles, like I'll use the example of how many firewalls do you make people jump through to get to the data? Is it readily available from a browser, or do they have to RDP into some segregated system and then hop through into another DMZ'd off area to get to the data? There are reasons to do all of those things. Again, cybersecurity, key part of our business here, but we also want to make sure that the data that people need is readily accessible when they need it, and that they have the right reports. It drives me batty when people say, I just want to be able to export the data to Excel. I say, why do you want to do that? Well, I want to build whatever report I want. Well, let's talk about what reports you need so we can get you the right reports built. Or better yet, how about we get you access to the data so you can build your own reports in industrial tools, not in Microsoft Excel. Love Excel, but it shouldn't be the place we start with. And that leads right into creating an industrial data task force. So once you've got good data coming in, you know the reports that you need. I like to think about this as an empowered team that can build their own reports or make sure that people are using the systems and getting the most value out. And this doesn't have to be a centralized team of dedicated resources. It could just be a team of an ad hoc team of people with, I'll say, similar interests from around the business or around your facility that have taken a vested interest in understanding the tools and understanding the data sources and really are looking to solve problems. Maybe it's your continuous improvement leader leading it, or maybe it's the quality team leading it. As long as somebody's at the helm of the ship, bring in people with other diverse backgrounds to say what data is useful and how can we use it to solve problems. Next up is optimizing KPIs. So this one's always an interesting conversation, but really trying to think about what KPIs are important to you and how do you collect the right information and present it out to folks so that they can consume it in a timely fashion to make an impact. And the first one here is I like to think about managing conflicting KPIs. And some people look at me, they're like, what are you talking about? What the heck does that even mean? The example I'll use is on-time delivery or on-time in full, some sort of metric along those lines, versus inventory levels. And depending on who you are and where you sit in the organization, let's say a production supervisor, they don't necessarily care about inventory levels. They're working towards on-time in full. They want to hit their customer delivery marks every time that they need to. Well, there's somebody in supply chain or procurement, they're tasked with maintaining optimized inventory levels, aka reducing cash in a warehouse. So they're constantly pushing the bar to say, how much less can we have? How can we ensure that our truckers will have them here when we need them? And ultimately, they're conflicting, right? You need to make sure that you've always got enough inventory on hand to make the product when you need to make it. And this is where it really comes down to making sure that those two functions are working together so they understand how my KPI impacts your KPI. Because it may actually be worth it from a customer satisfaction standpoint to carry a little more inventory on hand to make sure that you always hit the on-time in full. Really trying to put the customer at the forefront of what you're trying to do every day. And the next is a little bit different, but it's how do we pick what we're monitoring? And this is one where I'll say some people, myself included at one point in my career, said, oh my goodness, I've got an unlimited historian. Let's just gather all the data we can. Let's put it all in there. And at some point we'll shake it and see what falls out. And the problem with that approach is really you just create this thing that we like to refer to as a data swamp. You've got so much data that you don't know how to swim through it and find any actionable insights. Now, some people would say that's great, shove it in the machine learning and AI tools and they'll pop out the answers. But I like to say, let's take a little bit more pragmatic approach and think up front, what problems might we solve if we put that data in the database? So things like, am I trying to predict downtime events? Am I trying to predict quality events? Am I trying to understand my center line? And maybe avoid things like every time the sensor is made, I'm going to log it to the database. Yeah, that could be helpful if you're trying to troubleshoot something 2 years from now to be able to replay and say what happened. But by and large, it's probably not as useful of information. So as you're thinking about what information to collect, think about how would I use this information to solve a problem and at what frequency do I need to collect it and to what level? Great example is temperature. Do I need to collect temperature at 8 decimal places, or can I collect temperature to the nearest whole number? Right? I don't necessarily need to clog up my tag historian or my database when the temperature fluctuates by 0.0000001 degree Fahrenheit. But maybe it does. Maybe you're in a chemical reaction process and you really need to track it to that level. If you do, that's great. Make sure you've got the capabilities to do so. And lastly, here on customizing KPIs for different roles, it really goes to the managing conflicting as well as what we'll talk about on the next couple of slides, which is different roles within the organization have different KPIs that they're being measured to and that they're tracking to. And really just need to make sure that everybody understands how their KPIs fit into the overall ecosystem to define success or lack of success, rather, within a given organization. So with that in mind, the next topic that we're hearing a lot of buzz about lately is the concept of a manufacturing control tower or supply chain control tower for some other folks. So you think about a supply chain control tower, which is maybe it's harvesting raw cotton to make outgoing shirt in a factory or in a Walmart distribution center somewhere. We're saying let's take a little more focused approach and say let's talk about just within the factory. So what is important to you to be able to say my factory is running well or my factories are running well, and bringing all of that into one single pane of glass so that you can have quick at a glance data to make some decisions on. Which plant is hurting my supply chain and why is kind of the key here. And this is by no means a finished example that I would say is like, oh yeah, if you build this, then it's going to solve world hunger. This is just a concept that you could rank your sites by some sort of ranking and look at the key metrics that most sites have within their gimbal boards or their squawk boards out on the factory floor: safety, quality, cost, and delivery, and quickly at a glance be able to identify which ones need help. So in this example here, site A, they're missing on safety, quality, and cost. Hey, they're hitting delivery, that's great, but they're hurting people and they're making bad product as a part of it. That's no good. So the idea here would be that there'd be a level 2 and a level 3 where you could drill into site A and understand, well, what kind of safety issues do I have? Do I have first aids or recordables or days away from work, right? Those are all different metrics that can drive a safety score. And each one of those could have their own ranking and weighting to say, if I have one recordable, I'm red, or if I have 3 or 4 initial injuries, that turns it red, right? You could put that kind of context in the background so that, it, again, quickly at a glance, understand what sites have issues and how do you focus. And, you know, I've talked with a bunch of different customers about this concept, and there is no one answer, I'd say. It really comes down to, what are your KPIs? How do you measure success? How do you think about things? But at the same time, there's a lot of standards out there that, the ones I just mentioned for safety, recordables and initial injuries, notice of violation on the environmental side. There's a lot of things that could apply that are pretty common across most manufacturing facilities, but you might put a different weighting to it and say, if I have one OSHA recordable, it's red, or somebody else might say, well, unfortunately, they're a little more common here. I want to get away from it, but right now, I won't turn it red at 1, I'll turn it red at 2 or 3. So this is something that we've been hearing more and more about, and that we see people starting to move and implement as a means to become a little more proactive. So not predictive, but a little more proactive on problem solving. So rather than waiting until a week later, they can look at things instantaneously. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about deployment templates. And this is, I'll say it's pretty important in today's environment, whether you're growing through mergers and acquisitions or just organically. We see a lot of folks right now that are saying, how do I do more with less? Right? It goes back to the people challenges we talked about earlier, and just understanding, how do I take what I'm doing at one good site and deploy it everywhere? How do I take it from the sites I've been working at for 5 years and apply it to the new site? So I use a little bit of a story here. So again, my GE transportation experience, we had fabrication, we had machining, and we had assembly. And those 3 different manufacturing types, they really require different templates. So some people would say, well, you're making stuff. Everybody's just making stuff. But when it comes down to it, in the fabrication world, there was a lot of spot welding. And OEE off a spot welder, if you've ever tried to do that, is pretty abysmal, even in the really, really good spot welders. Versus a CNC, where you've got a person, they load a part and it might run for 4 or 6 hours. Really there, you're talking about true machine performance, excuse me. And then on the assembly side of things, you might not have any machines at all. It's all operator driven. So my guidance here is that when we're thinking about MES, when we're thinking about dashboarding or reporting, thinking about templates that once created can be scaled to similarly oriented manufacturing types. So once you've developed your template for fabrication, for example, if you've got one site that does a ton of fab, you've developed your template. When you go to another fab site, you should be able to quickly and easily deploy that template there as well. Same with assembly. Once you've developed an assembly template, you should be able to apply that to anywhere that assembles. But it'd be remiss if I said I would never try to apply my assembly template to a fabrication site. It's just not going to work. So all that said, when you're thinking about how do I embark on this journey, or if you're thinking about how do I scale to new sites, you've got to say, do I have a robust set of templates, or did I create them with blinders on to that one site that was my pilot site and then never go back and revisit it and say, how could I do it better? So a couple other things that we're seeing right now related to templates and overall deployments, and we'll skip to the right-hand side and then kind of work our way left again, is integrated systems. So if you think about ISA 95 model, right, at one point people had all these different business systems and sometimes they made them talk, sometimes they didn't. What we're seeing right now is a lot of folks are really looking to say, I want one single pane of glass for my operator. I've used my ERP for years, or I've used this quality tool that I built custom for years, and I really want one tool for the operators to work with and then send the data around in the background. I don't want them to have to know 6 different logins and why I go to this system versus why I go to that system. So we are seeing this more and more, and seeing a lot of people shift ERPs right now too. So as they're shifting an ERP, they're starting to think about what other systems could I sunset while I'm doing this? How do I give my operators that single pane of glass? And oh, by the way, we want to make them a connected worker while we're at it. So connected worker could mean things like AR and VR, right? Put on a HoloLens or put on a RealWear headset and augment their reality. Or it could just be a tablet, right? Get it off of the clipboard, off of the computer, into the operator's hands so that they can perform their work and collect their data at the same time. Or one of my coworkers always says, the best user interface is no user interface. So how do we collect that data without the operator having to do anything? Which I think is a really important aspect to all of this, is we can't make people that are amazing machinists into data scientists. That's not what they want to do. So we've got to think about how do we empower them, right? Back to the beginning, how do we empower that person to be the best operator they can be? And that's done through prioritizing their involvement. So again, upfront, collecting information, what's useful, what's helpful. It might even be like just some nice to have things that they would like to do, even if you're not sure how you'd ever use the data. If you can gain buy-in by adding that one extra field because it's something they think they might need, you gain some serious street cred by listening to the operator and showing them that you listened. So we've got one more survey coming up, and then I think we're gonna jump into the Q&A. So this next survey is, what is your top motivator for digital transformation? I'm gonna send this over to the audience now. And similar to the first couple, we'll give it a few seconds. The results will start to come in, and then we'll give it about 30 seconds in total. I'll share them out. And then I think we'll jump to the Q&A from there. All right, I see one result come in so far. Thank you for that. All right, we've got some more results are starting to flow in now. Competitive advantage looks like it's taken a quick lead. I feel like a racehorse announcer right now. Give it just another 5 or 10 seconds. Thank you to everybody for your participation here. I think these surveys, while not completely interactive, are better than you just listening to me talk the whole morning, so thank you. All right, great. I'm gonna go ahead and send these back over. I think the survey will keep going though if you wanna send in your answer. So competitive advantage is 67% of you. That's the reason you're looking to do something like this. So now I'd like to bring in Jeremy Boren. He's our brand manager here at GrayMatter.
Hey, Todd, good morning.
Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, can you hear me okay? Yeah, thanks for having me aboard. Great stuff so far, and I love to see the survey results, especially on the competitive advantage. I think that's why a lot of people start this stuff, more so than a leadership directive or, even supply chain challenges. I mean, those are important as well. But I wanted to move to a couple of questions we actually got from the audience before, that people were kind enough to share kind of some of the projects that they're working on or stuff that they're dealing with. And the first one is, and it goes back to something you've talked about throughout this morning, and it's getting the operators involved, getting them invested. what are some of the best ways to get alignment, especially at the beginning of a project? Because yes, it's about technology, but it's way, way more about that buy-in from operators and the people who are actually, doing this stuff on the plant floor.
Sure. So I think about alignment kind of a couple different ways. One is at the leadership level, and then the other is at the plant floor level. And in either case, I'd say it really starts with some of those project management 101 fundamentals. Like, do you have a project charter? Do you know where you're headed? And making sure that people are literally sitting down in a room together or virtually like we are today and having the conversation about, why are we doing this? What are we trying to get out of it? Are we trying to get more product out? Are we trying to reduce headcount? Are we trying to make things more cost competitively? And literally get people to put ink on paper and say, yes, I agree, this is what we're going after. And at the same time, educating the workforce on why you're trying to do it, right? This may be a point where they don't get so much of a say in the why, but they need to understand the why. And I'm a firm believer that once people understand the why, they'll get behind it. But if you just say, hey, we're going to go do this really cool stuff and we're going to be digitally transformed, part of them's thinking, so you're trying to get rid of me? You're bringing in robots?
Sure.
So, the example I use a ton is oftentimes it's not about reducing headcount at all. It's about keeping a plant viable so that your kids or grandkids can work there. And when you start to put it like that, people are like, oh, yeah, you're right. I want to retire. I'm a baby boomer and I'm going to be out here in a couple of years. And oh, by the way, my kids are already working here. So getting them up to speed with why you're doing it, I'd say is super important in that alignment step.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I like the idea of a project charter. Does that happen on kind of a site-by-site basis or, kind of overall for the company?
I think it can be both. You could have an overarching charter for the whole initiative, but then you could have it site by site where you're going after individual projects first. So, kind of the North Star concept, right? The North Star is to be the company-wide, we're going to be the most competitive XYZ in our industry and whatever. But then on a site-by-site level, it's more of the how. How are we going to get there? We're going to enable operators, or we're going to implement digital tools to reduce quality defects. So I think the charters can really be both and need to be both.
Absolutely. So if you're starting with a single site, that's probably the experience of a lot of companies. But you obviously, the goal for a lot of companies is to scale it. You have multiple facilities, maybe in multiple countries even. What are some ways, if people are looking for advice on this, to scale out a project?
Sure. So we talked a little bit a few minutes ago about deployment templates. And I'd say the key thing for me to scaling is understanding the end game. So you got your project charter now, you know what you're trying to do. You need to think about what kind of facilities do you have, and are you a facility or manufacturing type that only does one thing and you're the best at it? Like I'll say machining, and you only do machining. Or are you more the example I said where I have fab and I have machining and I have assembly and I do all these other things. I do test and electronics, and thinking about where do I want to be in the end, and building those templates and the roadmap to say, here are the iterative steps I need to take to make sure that when I get to that site over there, I'm not starting over, right? Think about the end game in mind, and think about how you build for the masses, even though you're implementing for the individuals to get started.
No, that totally makes sense. And so I think that kind of takes us to this other one that we get a lot, and it's thinking about the differences between standardization and customization. Can you kind of tease that out for us? Because people are always talking about buzzwords and all of that, but there's real meaning here on those terms, and I think it's important to understand them in the context today.
Sure. Yeah. When I think about the different products that exist on the market, you can always bring up a blank sheet of Python or .NET and start coding exactly what you want the system to do. That would be the customization route, and that is a surefire way to have vendor lock-in and be beholden to probably one individual for for the rest of your plant's days, versus standardization where you're using out-of-the-box tools and you are configuring them to do what you want it to do. So saying, how do I use this user display or this dashboard that somebody already built for me, and I just need to say, hey, my product is called ABC versus your product, Jeremy, that's called 1, 2, 3, and we want to configure it. Or I'm sorry, the words today are no code and low code, synonymous with configuration. So here at GrayMatter, we're always pushing for how do we use a standardized approach, use out of the box wherever possible, and really save that customization for things that must truly be customized.
Yeah, because I mean that's where you can really start to get scope creep and some other issues on your project, right?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. The other one that we get, and we got before on this one is proof of concepts, POCs. I know you hear about these a lot in what you do, and probably in your previous life as well. So are they effective? Do they work? What's your perspective on them?
So proof of concepts. First, we'll talk about the acronym soup. There's POCs, there's POVs, there's pilots, and to me, they're all different. So a proof of concept is really about defining a very small set of criteria to say, why are you doing this? And if we do it, can we prove that it works? Not that it makes us the most cost-effective whatever, or not that we are reducing costs by 10x, but just literally, if we do it, will it work? We've got a POC going on right now with a customer who is starting to build a system themselves from scratch. We said, hey, we've got this tool that if you configure it, you don't have to own any of the code long term, right? So really thinking about things like that and saying, what is our exit strategy from this proof of concept? Because the proof of concept should not be the end game, and you should be learning from it. So I'm a big Eric Ries lean startup fan. It was almost required reading at GE. But I'll say defining your leap of faith assumptions up front. What are you trying to prove out of your POC, and saying what success looks like, and even time bound it and say, we are, from the day we say the POC is implemented, give yourself a 30, 60, 90-day window and say, at this checkpoint, we're going to check in and determine, did we meet our leap of faith assumptions or not? And at that time, are we going to pivot or persevere? Do we think we've got enough to be able to go roll out, or do we need to kind of revert back and do something totally different because it didn't work? But it's all about the upfront contracts and defining success, or otherwise you just get stuck forever in some POC.
Right, absolutely. Todd, let's go to our audience questions that have come in live today, and then I'm going to ask the first one, and then we'll turn things over to Dennis, and he can help us out with some of the others that we're getting from the great audience today. So the first one is actually asking if you're technology agnostic. If that's right, I kind of know the answer to that. That's the first part of it, and then it's how do you choose technologies to deploy, especially since there's so many solutions out there in the ISA 95 tech stack. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the ISA part and being technology agnostic and how you decide what to deploy.
Sure. So here at GrayMatter, we are technology agnostic. We're certified in all, I'd say almost all of the big techs out there. And we've got some that I'll say like better than others, and we can always help people understand why we might recommend one versus the other. But often what we do, back to the beginning and who GrayMatter is and what we do, that technology consulting side of things is helping you document what are your requirements. So I've done this with a number of customers over the last couple of years where we come in and help with an upfront requirements gathering session. And we're able to say, we need these sets of capabilities. And then we go to tools like Gartner and say, who plays in this space and why are they better or worse than other folks? And then we bring them in to do demonstrations and talk about why their products are or are not capable. And typically try to remove myself from having any bias there and say, let's let the software vendors show what they can and cannot do and help the end customer make informed decisions about what really is the tool that will help them solve their issues.
Yeah, and that's something that I think everyone struggles with. And so that's where, somebody who deals with these different technology stacks all the time can be super helpful. So I want to bring Dennis back in, and we'll go through some of the other questions that we've gotten today from our live audience.
Sure.
Thank you, gentlemen. A quick reminder to the audience, to submit your questions, simply type into the Ask a Question window on the left side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. And we have two questions here that are on the same theme. So let me start with, what's the best way to go from manual data collection to digital data collection?
So that's a really good one. And unfortunately, it's a really hard one to answer because it depends on what kind of industry you're in and what you're doing. So I've got a customer right now where they're doing a lot of measuring of parts. So they've got calipers and height gauges and thickness gauges and that sort of thing. And in that realm, it's about connecting to the calipers or the height gauges. And we've got a group of partners that we work with to say, let's go pull in that data. If you've got PLCs or DCS systems, it's a totally different approach, but there's tools there to do that as well. Or if you're just visually inspecting things, right? Is it green or is it blue, or what shade is it? It can be manual entry into a digital format. So I'd say it really starts with what kind of data are you collecting? What frequency do you need to collect it? What is the source of data? And then do you have specifications and limits and that sort of things around the data to then bring it in? So I'm sure I did not answer the question, but unfortunately with almost everything we do, the answer is it depends. And it really comes down to what kind of data do you need in your environment? And then we can take a look at, well, how could we collect that data for you?
Okay, so let's say we figured out those variables, we have our plan, whatever it is, and you're ready to go. Do you see a fear factor from plant personnel on digitization being a threat versus this being a chance for these employees to amplify their skill sets?
So if not handled correctly, absolutely. And this is where I say people have got to be at the forefront. They've got to understand the why. So what I always advocate for is please, please, please don't leave your operators in the dark until you're ready to go live. Make sure they are involved in the journey from the very first day you're talking about a digital transformation. Our marketing team here at GrayMatter has even done some hype videos for people where it's like, hey, this is coming and here's why. And we'll start communicating just the grandiose concepts long before anything is ever done. So that way, when things start to come in, people are like, oh yeah, this is that thing I heard about. I saw the video. I'm glad it's finally here. But then also tying into collecting valuable feedback from people. So making sure they understand that they're going to leave behind a legacy if they're participating in the requirements gathering. And putting it in the perspective of, like I said, maybe their kids or grandkids want to work there. How do we get them to think about it's not just me, it's the community I live in, it's the community my facility work exists in, and get that information so that it can be there for the generations to come.
I'm curious, and this is for me, what kinds of opportunities open up for operators when a digitization project happens? What sort of things can they do that they couldn't? How can they be upskilled? What do people on the floor get from a project like this?
Sure. So I'd say, again, it varies depending on where you're at and what your factories are doing. For some people, it might be that they've been a machinist their whole career and they've never really touched a computer. So they're going to, first off, just get some basic computer literacy skills. But it could also be an opportunity for somebody to say, hey, you know what? I know how to solve these problems. Let me help you document if you start, let's say you're doing an SPC tool and you say, I'm starting to see trends where my data is trending in this direction. You could collect their feedback and say, what do you do when this happens? And they start to become the ambassador for change, as well as maybe even like an advanced leadership role to say, hey, you know what? You're no longer just the machinist, but now you're the chief troubleshooter, or you become the setup guy because you've got this extra input that is valuable to your team.
Honestly, I know we covered this in part during the presentation, but I want to go back to it now that we're on the subject again.
Sure.
So what are ways that companies can leverage their operators, leverage their employees to make these digitization initiatives successful? And I ask because a very common theme I encounter is that operators can be used as a resource to let companies know, what sort of information they need. So I was wondering if you have any any stories or any advice on how companies can use operators to help make a project like this successful, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's always a little fine line to walk, because most people say, well, I've got to make products, so I have to have my people still working. But I think tools like roundtables, as a super simple example, right? Most people have a lunch break, so bring them in over lunch break, give everybody lunch, and have a roundtable to talk about the why you might do it, and just get people excited. And then as you're starting to do the deeper dives in the data collection, talk with them about key problems that they have. How could these tools, if implemented, right? Don't guarantee they will be implemented, but how could these tools, if implemented, help them? And what sorts of changes do they see as being necessary to make their job easier or better? And really try to make it about them, right? Because at the end of the day, if they can make a better product, make it faster, it'll end up being cheaper, they're going to be happy, you're going to be happy. So I was on site a few weeks ago with a customer, and was talking with the operator. He's been there quite a long time, and he's got like 7 different systems that he's got to interact with. So have them show you, right, Gemba, go to the shop floor, see what's really happening, have them show you all the different tools that they have to interact with and understand why, and then go design a better mousetrap to say, you don't have to interact with all 7 of these anymore. We're going to get it down to 2 or 3. Right? Don't even promise you're going to get it to 1, because that might not be worth the cost. But if you can get it simpler, then they don't have to be software experts anymore. They can just be experts at running the process that they run.
What is your recommendation for building proper visibility for the future MES?
I see that question coming in. I'm just rereading it. Recommendation for building proper visibility for the future MES. I'm not sure I understand exactly what this question's asking, but I'll answer what I think maybe they're going after. And I'll say that MES can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I was with somebody a year or so ago, and they thought MES was only an OEE tool. They weren't familiar with it. It could be scheduling or quality or SPC or anything else. So again, back to project charter and alignment and all of those things, making sure people understand what is coming and when it's coming. So if you're starting out on a journey to implement MES, and MES to you is all of those things, then explain to people in layman's terms what is going to be simplified by implementing a new piece of software, and what's going to be changing and different from the job they do today, to provide that visibility.
Okay. We've covered a lot of different facets here. What advice would you give to a team that's trying to determine how to get started on an MES project? What about all we've discussed should they be looking at first?
I'd say it's your requirements, right? What are you trying to get out of this project? Why are you doing it? And if you're like, it's just a leadership directive, I'm not really sure. My contact information is there, and so is our website. That's where you could lean on industry experts like us to come in and help you document some of the why. But to me, it's all about understanding where you're trying to go and what you're trying to get out of it.
And Todd, another question we've gotten is what are some of the specific KPIs that you've seen manufacturers really prioritize, like really good examples of them that come to mind? Because we talk about KPIs, and I know it's a process for everybody and it's unique and it depends on the project, but what are a couple metrics that you have found customers say are really valuable once they get along in that MES project, in that digital transformation project?
Sure. So I'll say a lot of people think that OEE is the holy grail KPI on a more automated factory. And I like to say, if you're just getting started, OEE is probably not the right KPI to start with. I prefer availability. I think it's a much simpler KPI to start with. Most people can wrap their heads around, are my machines running when they're supposed to be running or not? Forget about the performance side and forget about the quality side. Again, to get started, should have aspirations of getting there. I see a lot of people stagnate around defining what OEE means to them, and if they're really an OEE shop or if they're a TEEP shop, or just some of these other acronyms that just convoluted. So start simple. Another one is all about that on time in full, right? On time delivery. If I know when the customer needs the order, am I making it on time? And do I have visibility into that? So do I know when I need to start it to have it made based on my typical lead time to get it delivered to the customer? Forget about the trucking and rail industry right now and what's happening to them, right? Focus on what you can control with some of those average lead times built in. Those would be my two from a performance standpoint.
Right. And a lot of people in the survey answered that competitive advantage is one of the reasons that they would embark on a project like this or accelerate one that maybe has already started. And to me, both of those KPIs would fit into that, knowing what's running and maybe how it's running. And then also that on-time delivery. I mean, those seem like things that intuitively to an outsider, every company should have, nailed down pat, but that's not the case. There's a lot. There's so many companies, organizations out there that are still trying to achieve those simple, metrics, and it can be because of expansion or just because, it hasn't been done before. But don't feel like you're behind if you don't have those, nailed yet, because that's what we see every day, right, Todd?
For sure. And the one thing I'll throw in here is that, it's digital transformation is not just for the big guys. It really, I like to use the word democratized here, but the software world has democratized the capability for everybody to embark on some sort of a digital transformation journey and have this sort of visibility. So don't think that if you're a one plant facility that you're too small to do it. I'm sure there's efficiencies to be gained by using digital tools.
And this will be our last question today. What are questions you always get specifically from leadership when starting a project?
How do I calculate my ROI? And we've got tools to help with that. I'd say there's a lot of standard inputs that we can take into account. We can help you consider, right? If you're a largely paper-based company or largely swivel chair integration, and we can help you think through, well, how much time do you waste of people's time to do certain things, or how much paper can you stop printing, or lots of things like that. But for sure, Dennis, I'd say I hear all the time, how do I justify this? What's it worth? And some people are good with, well, here's what industry standards are, but some people want to know what's our ROI going to be? And I usually say, well, it comes down to change management and how well you implement it and effectively implement it. But we can help with some of the math behind the scenes too.
That's the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our audience for all their questions. I'd like to thank our speakers, Todd Virden and Jeremy Boren, and our sponsor, GrayMatter, for today's presentation. On behalf of Industry Week, please have a productive remainder of the day. Thank you, everyone.